Hey guys, I'm here with Dell Hungerford of Healing Frequencies Music. She's the one that made all of the sound essences that we have over on Freedom Flowers. So we're going to talk about the 528 and the 713 specifically today because those two have been around the longest. We've been using them for a while. We have hashed out some new information and we're going to share that with you guys. So yeah, that's where we're at today.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I'll just say that sometimes you have to marinate in something for a while before you really know what it does.
yeah, absolutely. Even with the flowers, when we release them and they're new, it's still, you know, we think we know, but we don't really have the whole details and all of the nuances of what they do. So we're about 6 years into the 528 and maybe 5 years into the 713.
Mhm.
So we're feeling a little more solid on some things. So yeah, I'll let Dell start with the 528.
Okay, well, the 528, it started with me wanting to create a frequency or a sound essence from a frequency that people say is healing for the DNA. And I'm like, I can partner with that. So, there's not a lot of scientific evidence out there about the 528, but we forget that intent is a major part of this. And people's intent when they're listening to the 528 is that it will bring healing into their DNA. And I'm like, great, fine. So I actually created 3 songs from the 528 frequency. And I had this bottle of water sitting on the keyboard because I knew I was going to create an essence out of it as I was actually creating the songs. Then when I came home from adding the percussion and the clarinet parts in the studio, then the final product, I prayed in the spirit a lot over it while the music was playing, because at that point, if you are praying in the spirit, releasing your tongue language, or what did you call that earlier when you were spirit language? Thank you. Then you're not necessarily praying what you want. You're just praying what's coming up from spirit.
Mhm.
And I felt that was very important because, again, when we did this, we knew what people were saying it was, but I wanted the unknown pieces in there too, and didn't want to use a predetermined thing on it because we didn't know what that was going to all be about.
Right, because intent is great, but it does put some limits around things, and that's not really what our intention is to begin with. So, yeah, you put a lot into that because that was like an 8-hour marinating time of you being, if I remember right.
Well, that part of it was the
Right.
part when I came home. But I think altogether, you're looking at probably 16 to 24 hours for the whole thing
Yeah.
because I did it in pieces, the actual recording of the music. And then I think I might have played looped the keyboard sounds again before I actually went into the studio. But I did not take the bottle of water with me to the studio because I didn't want the stuff from school I just left it all at my house. Oh, you have a puppy. Always welcome.
His appearance.
Well, I'm surprised that I wouldn't be one bit surprised if we don't see a cat somewhere along the line. Uh, Teddy, fortunately, is sleeping. He's not trying to crawl up the side of me. But anyway, so with the 528, I've been taking it pretty much since it came out. And when we talked about this earlier, you had said something about the 7-year cycle that our cells rejuvenate after 7 years. And I'm 6 years into that. And because I didn't necessarily know what to expect, other than the fact that I sensed that the 528 was about your individual DNA and all the memory that you're carrying in your DNA from your ancestors, because they say that 97% of our DNA, we don't really know what it does. It's a mystery. But now scientists are saying that our epigenetics are in that 97%, which means we're carrying the memory of our ancestors all the way back to the beginning of time. And so it's cleaning all that stuff out as well. And a lot of the thoughts that we have, a lot of the memories, the traumas and things from our ancestors, we still carry that in our DNA. And so the 528, I believe, deals with some of that stuff. But when I created it, I didn't know about all that.
Right.
That goes back to the spirit language, because you're speaking into things, what was intended to be there from creator.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wonder too if it's unlocking some things that are supposed to be there that got hijacked or subverted, or anything like that, because those generational blessings are supposed to roll for 100 generations, and I don't know if we're seeing that.
Well, hold up that book that you showed me earlier, that one that we did together, because we experimented on this with that, accessing your spiritual inheritance.
Yeah,
And
all of our 528 early experiments are recorded in here, and there is a template in here that you can use either with the essence or just without. You don't need the essence to do it. It's
I
really
just,
cool.
I just think the essence added a little extra turbo boost, for lack of a
Oh yeah,
better.
I mean, that really got all of us into it, and we wouldn't have gotten to the places that we went without it. But at the same time, we've got the roadmap in there for people.
Right. Well, see, because you and Alice both went through doors,
Mhm.
but it was all about your ancestral stuff and all of those things. You're accessing your spiritual inheritance, which was embedded into your DNA from the beginning of your ancestral line.
Right. And that was major unlocking. Like the book Broken to Whole would not have been opened up to me without the work that I did in accessing. And I didn't talk about it in the book because it was a weird thing. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know if that's really back there in my line. I'm like, I'll just go with it.
Well,
I didn't publish it, and that turned out to be like the biggie.
well, if you think about it, none of the books that we have written, any of us, including Alice, probably would have occurred had we not gone through some of this stuff
Yeah.
in accessing your spiritual inheritance. And I don't necessarily talk about this in that book. I do, I think, in accessing the kingdom realms, which unfortunately I didn't bring any of my books with me up here. They're somewhere on the bookshelf behind. But I talk about a time after, engaging with what you talk about in accessing the spiritual inheritance, where I went into a musical instrument room and I find all these instruments and things. One of them was for one of my brothers. And I was finding out things from my ancestral line. And even in the story about the tree roots and beavers, that's in that book, isn't it? Accessing your spiritual inheritance. I think it is at the end. There's one more story at the end
Yeah.
where there were scrolls.
I
and
turned right to it. Yep.
and the beavers, right, were accepting they were accepting the easy route. They took the easy scrolls, and there's all these other scrolls on the wall. And I'm like, I think I'd rather have those, because I knew in my gut that those were the right scrolls. But some of my ancestors had chosen the other ones, because sometimes we choose the easy road. So in a sense, by taking the 528, we're unlocking things as well. And so you unlocked more writing. I unlocked more writing. I unlocked the whole frequency immersion thing with the crystal bowls. So much of what I'm doing probably did come out of taking the 528, even though I thought at first it had a lot to do with my physical body. But some of that might come out of the 713 too, which we'll get to here in a minute once we're done with the 528. But is there anything else about the 528 that we can throw out there?
Oh, just looking at my notes. Don't mind me.
It's okay. I'll just sing a song for you. It would be a cheesy song.
Let's move on. 713.
Okay. All right. So the 713 came about a year later after I heard, oh, you showed it. Yay. After I watched a video by Dr. Ogbanaya. I can't remember his first name.
Adonijah.
Adonijah Ogbanaya. And he is a Messianic Jew and understands the Hebrew culture quite well because I believe he was actually a priest. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me on that. But he's very knowledgeable, has a couple of doctoral degrees, understands gematria, which is basically numerology, and how that completely works through the entire Hebrew system. And gematria is taking all the Hebrew letters, assigning them numbers, and then each word has its a number. Then you look up the meaning of the number, and the number 713 actually came from the gematria of the first few words in the Bible verse from John 1:1. In the beginning was God, and the word was, and the word was God. I
Yeah.
have that verse. My brain didn't remember it. Sorry. But after listening to this teaching, I immediately went to my keyboard within 5 minutes of hearing the teaching and created this song. I didn't necessarily know what it was. I just knew that I had to create a frequency while this stuff was, or a song, while it was still stirring up within me. Now, I didn't necessarily put a bottle of water on the keyboard when I was doing it, but I later on, after coming back from the studio, I did the same thing and put the bottle of water on the speaker, and I think it marinated for days.
Well,
on that.
I remember in the video him going, somebody should put this in water.
And I'm like, and that's what
somebody can do that.
Yes. And I think I actually emailed him and said, I did it. I put it in water. But anyway.
Well, I was at a conference and I was vending at a Dr. O conference, and he comes by and he's checking everything out and looking at it, and he picks that up and he goes, you should give me this for free, totally joking, but
we did the same thing. And
so I did, because yeah, how could you not?
And I gave him the corresponding album because there's an album that goes with each essence. And so that's just to help the activation process. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what Dr. O says. And unfortunately, that teaching is no longer available on YouTube. And I will do a blog post about my activation and information that I got from the teaching, because I did take really good notes. But again, this is 5 years later. So I've had some experiences with it that I did not necessarily have when I created it. So as with this one, there was a lot of speaking in the spirit and stuff like that, because again, when you are creating something that you're not totally sure about, you just release your spirit language over it to fill in all the blanks. But so Dr. O says that the 713, it activates the fullness of creation. When we think about that, well, we are part of creation because we were intended to co-create. That's what we're here for. And that's why we have such a connection with the earth, is because we're really part of it. Creator says to us, I've now opened the gate for you to participate fully in who I am. Then Dr. O says, this is coming out of, he calls it the coming out of the grave effect, which is why we call it the 713. I think it's restoration, but it comes out of a resurrection. So resurrection is important because it's Creator's way of tuning the universe itself. Oh, because the tuning of the universe itself produces a sound that transforms. So a restoration can't happen unless there's a transformation. So that's basically what he's saying. And he also says that we create a new sound with our voice, which is the whole speaking and affirmations and decreeing over things. He also says it's a self-altering frequency of the universe, which I found that fascinating. He's including not just us, but the whole universe in this.
Right.
A whole bunch of layers. Then he goes on, we insert the 713 code to where it belongs. So our DNA begins to shift to who I was created to be. So this is the connection between the 528 and the 713, which we'll get a little bit more into later. So the resurrection is the restoration of the frequency of creation. And we use the 713 frequency to fight back the removal of the seed of corruption. And this is where we talked about, when you put a seed in the ground, it kind of goes through a dying process first. And you called that hypo something?
Well, not quite there yet. You were saying that it goes through the dying process and then it comes back up and it's closer to what it was originally created to be.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh, well, that sounds like dehybridization. Not that there's anything wrong with hybrids per se, but they are, something that man got a hold of and started to create, whether it was inspired and guided by creator or not. That's another story. There's definitely some things that have been bred for the wrong reasons, but I'm just saying that there are hybridizers out there that are working with the spirit and they're creating divine things and things that I really want to use and I'm looking for. Off track. But
No, but
just not that hybrids are bad because everybody thinks they are and they're not. But if you're going through the process of dehybridization, what that means is you're saving the seeds from the hybrids, you're growing them back out, and you're doing that through successive generations until the plant comes back to its original state.
which what happens to plants if you just kind of let them go, they eventually come back to their original state, some quicker than others.
Right. And that seems to be what happens with us on the 713, not that we die, but when we wake up in the morning after our little, not even a mini death, whatever sleeping is, there's like a reset there. So that's why I called it Deep Restoration. Dell has named her album In the Resurrection Code. So you could find that there. And the whole thing that struck me when she talked about the universe, or Dr. O talked about the universe being affected, that would be something that you really would want to put out into the atmosphere instead of just taking the drops, get the album to play the album.
Yeah. Well, I think, because I have two albums that have the 713, that one that's called Deep Calls to Deep.
Oh,
And then,
too?
well, that's the one that this was actually created out of, was from that album, but In the Resurrection Code also has the 713 in it as well. Dr. O also says that the 713 recalibrates the codes of our body, our soul, and our spirit. It affects everything in our lives, our finances, our mindsets, our connection to creation, everything about us. So it's bringing everything back into alignment for us, our body, our soul, our spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also, the last thing he says is we have a viral code that needs to be removed. And I suppose if you look at that as hybrid, the hybrid, that would go back to the ones that were not as good.
Right.
So it's just removing the things that are not meant to be so that we can function as we're supposed to function, as we were created to function in the beginning.
Well, just in our modern environment, we have so many things that are modifying our DNA all the time that aren't good.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a good point. So in taking the 713, so for example, I'm out the other day putting that polyurethane on top of some wood, and that stuff stinks. And all of a sudden I got to my mind, breathe in. I mean, so don't let the toxic fumes from that stuff, because I didn't even think to put a mask or anything on. I'm just like painting. And that stuff is toxic. And I just like, okay, I'm just going to breathe in the DNA of creator and just allow the things that are within me to override the negativity of that varnish or whatever. I don't know. That's that clear coat stuff that makes it shiny.
Yeah.
Is it polyurethane?
Could be. Depends on what you use.
It was by Minwax, and it's clear, and you put it on there. So those are examples of how the stuff that's negative outside of it, we can override it by this frequency. But again, I've been putting this frequency into my body for 5 years every day.
Yeah.
And so some of the sicknesses and the negativity and those things, as long as if I'm quickened to remember, okay, just use this to override that negativity, is like pulling out the hybrids or the pieces that are not necessary, that are harmful to us. It's overriding all of that stuff.
All the corruption.
The corruption, which he mentioned earlier. The other thing that we talked about, and I know we've talked about on several occasions, is can you pair music essences together with flower essences? And I personally have found that flower essences work very differently than the music essences, and I've not had an issue mixing them. What I will do is I'll do the 528 and 713 together, but then I'll do my flower essences at different times in the day. So I don't necessarily put them in the same drink, but I almost always start out the day with the 528 and the 713. And then of course my music theory brain goes to the fact that one is based on the note F, the other one is based on the note C. If you're using F as the fundamental or the tonic key, then C is the dominant, which is 5 notes higher. So F, G, A, B flat, C. So 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, which is the two main keys or sound that you hear in all music. If you listen to classical music, you're at the end of every movement. It's like 1, 5, 1. It always ends with that big 1, 5, 1, 5, 1 chord progression. And to think that these two frequencies focus on that important
The 1 and the 5.
1 and the 5 together, which I didn't intend. It just kind of happened. So to me, they work together, but it's on many, 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 many layers.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm careful about what we combine. I always tell people not to combine. And they would ask about combining 713 and 528. And I'd be like, well, they're not just two frequencies. There's all these layers to the music. It's not just the drone note that somebody put in and programmed into water. There's a whole 2 songs in those. So I was like, well, you wouldn't listen to 2 pieces of music at the same time. So why would you do that? And don't do that. And then with the flowers, I was just like, well, yeah, let's just do it. Let's put a 528 with this. And nobody yelled about it. And it seems like it's okay. So I don't know how to explain this, because to me, in my brain, frequency should be frequency. And it just isn't. Like, the flowers are on one level and the music are on another realm. And somehow they get along okay, or they don't interfere.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
And I don't know how to explain that. It's just like essential oils, those are frequency too, but people seem to be able to combine essential oils and essences with no issues, because they're working on 2 totally different planes.
Well, to answer your question about the music, as I said before, when you listen to a Beethoven symphony, and you have 4 different movements to every one of his symphonies, they're in different keys, but they're all related to the same symphony. And even if you listen to the first movement, Beethoven's Fifth, anyway, there's key changes that go all the way throughout the entire symphony. There's all these instruments that are mixed in there. There's all of these frequencies. There's all of this stuff. There's all these key changes. If you, in music theory, you were to take and, this is a 1 chord, this is a 5 of the 5, this is a minor 2. Oh, here's a Neapolitan 6, here's a French augmented 6 chord. That's all music speak. And all of that stuff is in a Beethoven symphony. And they're all individual things, but they're part of the overall picture. All the instruments, all the things, they go together in there. So when you have the 528 and the 713, it's almost like they're part of the same symphony. They play nice together because they outline that tonic dominant relationship, which is so prevalent in all music. Every piece of music, especially in Western music, is based on the tonic dominant relationship. even a lot of Eastern music can be. I don't think it's as obvious because they don't necessarily use chord progressions like Western music does. But so I think that should answer your question that they really do work together. It's like you've got your string section over here, you got your woodwinds and brass, you got your percussion. You've got all the various soloists and everybody's sitting in their places and they all have all these parts and they're all looking at a different piece of sheet music, but they're all playing it together. And all these notes, all these chords, all these rhythms are all thrown in there and it's harmonious. So it's like these two frequencies or essences harmoniously work together on multiple or in multiple dimensions.
Yeah. Yeah, the dimensions thing is really what sounds right to me.
Well, and that explains you've got your essential oils at one dimension, you've got your flower essences at another dimension, you've got sound essences at another dimension. And of course, then you've got the gem essences, and those are in another dimension yet. But then, of course, you've got emotional healing, you've got spiritual healing, you got emotional cleansing. All of those have their own dimension and they can work together at any point as you're led to do it. Now, one of the things that I saw between the 528 and the 713, you got the 713 here, you got the 528 here, they have their own thing. They come together, they bring their frequency together, and they create one thing that just is like a turbo booster power energy of bringing the two together.
So like a synergy effect where
Yes,
the sum is, or the sum is greater than the parts.
right. And I would not have necessarily recognized that unless I had taken them together. But it was a while before I started noticing a difference. I mean, I am in the 6th year of the 7-year process, and I'm healthier now than I have ever been my entire life, pretty much. Even when I was in my 20s and my 30s, because I had some physical issues that, you know, so, you know, and I'm quite a bit older than my 20s and my 30s now. And to think that as I'm getting older, I'm actually getting healthier.
Mm-hmm.
And I attribute that to a combination of several things. Again, that's also multidimensional. If you address each of the dimensions as you felt led to do so, sometimes you need the dimension of essential oils. Sometimes you need a flower essence. You can pair some flower essence with some music essences. And
Yeah.
I do think they play nice.
Yeah, they all have their place and their purpose too, and their area where they're the best thing.
I do have to say that we have to be careful because too much of a good thing can also cause issues. So you just have to know when you're at that threshold of it's too much. And you're much better about explaining that than I am.
We are basically triage for people who do too much.
Well, you see that, you know, honestly, you see that in the music essences and even in the healing music, because I'll get people who will really negatively trigger to some of the music. And it's because their being isn't ready to hear what's in that music and they don't realize they have a negative trigger to it. But then I'll change the music and put on another song and it's like instantaneous change. And they're not aware of it, but I am because I finally figured out what's going on. So I tell people when you choose music, listen to what feels good in your gut. Does that feel good to you at that moment? If it feels bad, it's not necessarily bad for you. It just means your system doesn't want it right now.
And for everybody listening, I just want to say that Dell has really long samples of everything on her website. So like every song on every album, I think you've got samples up.
Yeah, like 3-minute samples because the songs are 22 to 30 minutes each.
Yeah, so you can definitely check out what feels good to you before you buy it.
Yeah. And CD Baby, who is what they call an aggregator, has actually put every album up on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah.
So if people want to just listen to the music on YouTube, plus I also have several other things that I've created after those albums that I have on my YouTube channel. for people who just like to listen to YouTube things. There's just a lot of people who prefer to just make a playlist in YouTube and just play it all day long.
That works. Yeah.
And they mix and match whatever works for them. So there's a lot of opportunities, but you're going to find that one day you're going to like something and the next day you're like, "Ugh, it doesn't feel so good." And we tend to go negative thinking, well, that song must be bad. No, it's that your body doesn't want it today. It's too much of a good thing. It's
Yeah.
like your healing crisis that you were talking about.
Right.
And essences are the same way, including music essences. And so if you take them and you notice some negativity, it's just a matter of backing off a little bit. Right?
Yep. Well, I think that's the other thing too. People, when you said too much of a good thing, people get excited about something that works, so they double down. And
Yeah.
that's
It's
not
like
necessarily more.
I liken that to a college student studying for exam all night long the night before the exam and thinking they're going to retain the information on the exam. That's what it's doing. Now, I am very guilty of doing that, waiting until the night before to study all night, and I walk into the exam like, whoa. But that's what happens when you double down on something. It's better in, consistent, smaller things to get your body, soul, and your spirit used to, ooh, there's something new in my body. So,
Yeah.
but going back to the original question, I don't have an issue combining the 528 with the 713, mostly because I know the 528 seems to deal more with your DNA and your ancestral stuff, whereas the 713 just takes it to the next dimension and adds the whole creative process and everything around us into it as well. Plus, it's also dealing with mindsets, all kinds of craziness. And is like you said, I think the 713 just added to more of the creative side of me. There's things I'm doing now I would have never thought even 2 years ago I'd be doing.
Well, that's been the case for as long as I've known you, though.
Wait a minute, something new just came out. What in the heck is that? Well, you're the same way, Seneca.
I am. Is there any better way to be, though?
No, but now that I think about it, hold your horses here. This 2017 is when the 713 came out. Within 9 months of that, I finally figured out what the musical frequencies were of the Hebrew letters. I had it sitting in front of me for 2 years. I think it was started in about 2016 is where I figured a lot of stuff out, but I didn't have the full picture. And all of a sudden, one day, bammo, it was there. And I would be willing to bet that some of that came from 713. I'm just guessing. Because it opens things. It's when you can change mindsets and you change the way you think about something, then all of a sudden new doors and new possibilities open up to you that you never thought before.
I think that's the case with all of this stuff, though.
Yeah.
All of it has been really transformational. I was taking Prosper the other day for something and I got something that was not what I was aiming for at all, but it just exposed a deep root of something that I didn't know was still down there. And it was so simple and so to the point, and I dealt with it. But it was just one of the, you wouldn't have thought Prosper would have done that, which we get the wildest testimonies off of Prosper anyway.
But
it so deals with the mindsets. All of this stuff does.
Well, I tell you what, I don't have any mindsets now that I did. Starting at about, well, probably for me, things started in 2010. And so it's been 12 years that I started a journey that I never knew was possible. And I was in pretty rough shape in 2010. Even when I met you in 2013, I was still in pretty rough shape.
Mhm.
And, had something that was likened to chronic fatigue and couldn't figure out how to get through it. But that's all gone. I don't have gluten sensitivities anymore. So many issues that were on me are all bye-bye. So it's just nice to, there's lingering issues. And of course, certain things, you can get stuff on the way and then you have to get rid of that because we can develop an interesting mindset pretty quickly, which then goes into our body and our body says, where'd this come from?
What am I supposed to do with that?
Exactly. Are you
We're gonna stuff it here.
Okay, we have a cat appearance.
Oh,
Since we had a dog appearance, we have to have a cat one now. This is the Merlin. Merlin, you want to say, look into the, he's like, no.
yeah, he's crabby.
Are you crabby, Merlin?
Unimpressed with me, but his eyes match the northern lights, so that's good.
Thank you. Yes. Well, he just is glad to be sitting on mom's lap, aren't you? Those eyes are super bright with this. Merlin, I'll put you down and I'll kiss you later, okay? All right. Bye-bye. Well, you got to have a pet in every video, right?
Seems that way. Yeah.
So, is there anything else about these two frequencies that we've left out that we talked about earlier that we could add to the video?
Not that
Sorry for the noise. Merlin's playing in the paper on the floor. Can you hear it?
Yep.
He's digging in the paper. Cat. And then I just heard Axel bark.
Yeah, he's been wanting out for a while, so I'm gonna wrap up and I will catch you later.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.